gap between what we were doing pre-COVID, which was way back in 2019, and today, 2023. The last 4 years, it's been like a bit of a void, hasn't it? Everyone's so disorientated by COVID and what happened then. The lockdowns, the vax, and the whole government sort of chaos around it. The world events, what happened in America when Donald Trump had his election stolen from him. And we were all totally disorientated by that. Because before COVID, I just saw a victory path for the Nationalist parties. We were going from strength to strength. I was totally convinced Donald Trump was going to win a second term. And I didn't realise that they would actually create a scamdemic to stop him. Because that's why I believe that was the essential reason why that scamdemic was created. So they could move to postal votes and they could have this great cheat across many states of America and deprive Donald Trump of his rightful role in the second term. And it took the wind out of our sails because Donald Trump's first term was amazing. And see the nationalist movements around the world. We were fighting back against globalism and we were bringing common sense back into politics. And I thought there was real hope. So I was very disillusioned when what happened in America. And then when he failed to get justice, and we've had the Biden administration and the lunacy that's going on there now. And then we also, Boris Johnson, once he realised Biden was going to win, he moved to the left to fit in with Biden's agenda. Because when we got Boris Johnson elected in 2019, again, we had great expectations. We were going to get Brexit done, we were going to get immigration brought under control, we were going to get common sense brought back into the body politic in Britain, instead of all this left-wing nonsense. But Boris Johnson is a charlatan, and he fitted in with Biden. He knew where the power had moved, so he went with that. And so I kind of felt disappointed by that, very disappointed. And of course, I got involved with the anti-vax campaigns. My mother got the vax, she developed blood clots in her legs and she died. The vax killed her. She was 78. And you know, and this happened to a lot of families. We met you, he was on the bus. I said, where are you going, you? Go and see my wife in hospital, she's got COVID. How do you know she's got COVID? The doctor said. What are the symptoms? She's got blood clots in her neck. I said, has she had the vax? He said, yeah. So that's the vax, it's done that. She died. And my mate, his daughter was pregnant. She got the vax. Said, oh no. She had a stillbirth. I mean, there's just a catalogue of death, and we were like deprived of any expression over these issues. I mean, social media shut us down. I had a YouTube channel, very lively, active YouTube channel, getting up to 100,000 hits for videos. Anytime I mentioned COVID, you were taking the videos off straight away. So it became futile to post anything. Any comments, banned from Facebook, banned from Twitter. I mean, it was ferocious censorship of anyone who questioned what the establishment were doing over COVID. It was really terrifying. I saw dictatorship in this country. But I also saw something which is even more terrifying, was how gullible people were and how easily they went along with this whole agenda, at least initially, until voices started to rise. I remember we had this march in Liverpool, right? There was about 20 of us at Lime Street Station, and the police surrounded us, started to intimidate us. You better get home or you'll be going down the station and stuff. And we just thought, let's march, guys. So we burst out to the police cordon, marched down past St. John's precinct, and just started singing as we were marching, oh, and the saints, go marching in. And from nowhere, people came out of the side streets. 2,000 people gathered. There was people waiting for this march in side streets, and the police couldn't stop us then. And we saw huge marches in London, so the whole sort of political agenda moved from preserving our nations and stopping all this mass immigration and political correctness to fighting the vax and the COVID scam. And so everything got very disorientated, but now we're coming back to normality again now. We're coming back to the bread and butter issues. And we're faced with this one big issue in this country. Replacement. The great replacement. We, the British people, are being pushed out of our own nation. You could call it the Kalergi plan. It goes back a long way. They planned a long time for this agenda. Who are they? The globalists. Destroying the nation state and undermining the European peoples. And they're bringing in incredible numbers of immigrants. And it's the momentum is just out of control now. I mean, we see these small boats coming across the channel, but they're coming in by planes and boats and trains. 1 million people came into this country last year, 1 year, 1 million people. Huge number of those will go onto the welfare state and effectively colonised our welfare state. Like, we don't have an NHS problem in this country. We have an immigration problem. The NHS is overwhelmed by immigrants who've never contributed a penny. It's free at the point of use, and they're milking it to the hilt. You know, there's so many issues and so many problems that be in this country are due to the mass uncontrolled immigration. Now, I saw a statistic that 80% of Muslims in this country are dependent on state benefits. And they're not just dependent like old people, you know, slowly dying off. They're having huge families on state benefits, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 kids. And they've all got to get their free education, their free healthcare, their free this, a lot of them are living on benefits. Huge cost. I mean, this is why we've got this runaway inflation now, because we've got a serious fiscal policy problem in this country. The government are spending way too much money, and they're borrowing to finance it, and this is generating inflation. And this is true across the Western world, because they're all following the same agenda. But the end game is we, the British people, just as the Dutch people, and the German people, and the French people, and wherever else, Scandinavian people, Spanish people, we're becoming a lower and lower percentage of our nations. Like, I remember when I first started raising these issues in the mid-80s and saying, look, there's an attack. See, before the Great Replacement, there was the Great Sterility. What I mean by that is they started a program to make us a sterile nation, to stop us breeding. They started saying we had overpopulation. We started saying that we had to have a smaller family. We had to go from maybe a woman in Britain. I mean, my mother had 4 kids. You should only have 2 kids. And if you have more than 2 kids, you're somehow, you've done wrong. It's a bad thing to have children. Convince us to have smaller and smaller families. And this was done. I was watching a guy on the internet, Paul Ehrlich, who was an American Jew, and he said, this is how we do it. We do television programs. No one has more than 2 kids. If anyone has more than 2 kids, we criticise it. We created this stigma about having more than 2 children. 2 children to start, we can get it down to 1 child. We're going to have mass abortion. Let's stop killing the unborn children in the West. So if we kill off their children, there'll be no future for the West. Let's promote the homosexual agenda and get people away from reproductive sex to sort of all sorts of perverted sex, you know. And this is all in cultural Marxism. The German Jews in Frankfurt in the 1920s wrote all sorts of books about this. Hermann Marcuse, Thomas Adorno, Max Horkheimer. This is how we destroy the West. We break the family down, we make divorce easy. We take them out of churches. We don't want them learning Christian messages and Christian morals anymore. Let's promote immorality or amorality, no morality at all. And this was all their agenda. Way back in the 1920s, they hatched all this. This is how we Marxists destroy the West from within. And then as we get the fertility levels to decline, we start saying there's not enough workers. We bring in people from the third world, from Africa, from Asia. We change the demographic of the nation. And once we change the demography of the nation, it becomes a different nation. It ceases to be what it was. It loses touch with its roots. We cut it off from its history. People become disorientated and confused. Anything which makes life worth living, family, faith, patriotism, we rubbish that and turn people away from it. Get people, you know, lead them on this slippery slope to destruction. And that's what they've done. And they bought the governments, big money, the Soroses of this world, the Bloombergs of this world, you know, the New York billionaires. They bought the politicians of the world. They bought them. And to push this agenda of destroying the Western nations, breaking up our identity, taking away our future. They become the dominant strata now. They form themselves into global institutions like the EU, like the United Nations, like the World Economic Forum, like the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank. And these global institutions, like the World Health Organization during the pandemic, dictate this to the governments, the national governments. And it's just an agenda that's unfolded over the years until 2016. Suddenly there was just two spikes put into their wheels. One was Brexit, which they didn't think we would vote for Brexit, that we would actually cut free from the EU. And the other, of course, was Donald Trump, who was a populist in America, who was saying, like, we're going to stop this mass immigration. Because the mass immigration is the key element of it. The key element of the Great Reset is the Great Replacement. Once they strip away our sense of citizenship, our democratic power, then they have control. Everything becomes, you know, top down. They manipulate the masses. Because we are active citizens, we're all thinkers here. We're here tonight because we've thought through these issues. We have our own sense of identity. We've held on to what was good, our traditional views of British life. We've held on to it. We refuse to be castigated for being British or being white or being Christians. We don't see that as like some sort of ill. We see that as our strength. We see that as the goodness, the rock on which we can stand in life. And we're not going to get off that rock. See, the whole thing is to seduce you to come off the rock of Christ, the rock of nationhood, and to jump into the sea, the turbulent sea. And there's supposed to be liberty and freedom in the sea. You can be anything you want in the sea, but you're not. You're just in chaos. It's just a disaster. Yeah. Everyone becomes totally disorientated. And what happens? You drown, you die. This is the death of our nation. We have to stay on that rock. We've got to hold on to that rock and say that rock is worth preserving. Get back on the rock. Come back to the people we were. Some guy said, are you some sort of Christian fanatic? You want to take us into a sort of theocracy like Iran? I said, no. I want to go back to 1967. Before Labour, legalised abortion and sodomy and easy divorce and undermined their family in this country. I want to go back to my childhood in the 1960s in Walton and Liverpool when I was a happy child in a happy community and we had a great sense of ourselves as good people. It was a positive, healthy environment. That's what I want. That's all I want. Or even I'd take going back to 1996 before Tony Blair got in power and started to warp this country and started to destroy this country from within and open the floodgates for the whole third world to just pour into our nation. So if you go to Bradford, you go to Birmingham, you go to London, you go to Luton, you go to Coventry, you go to Leicester, blah, 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 blah. These cities are being transformed. You feel like an alien in your own country. Who gave them the right to do that? We never voted for that. And yet, just to protest against it, I say, look, we want to preserve what we had. We want to preserve who we are. We want to pass it on to the future generations, which is a very healthy trait. To simply hold on to that is to be condemned as somehow you're despicable, you're an evil person. You see, evil. Yeah, and they've got this great word, this R word that we all know, and they keep using it all the time, which means nothing, which just means you cannot defend what is yours. You can't defend your inheritance. Now, I'm standing here in front of the Union flag, and I know that the British went around the world in an incredibly benevolent spirit. And they went to country after country, and they built roads, and they built hospitals, and they built churches, and they developed the economy, and they evil practices and cruelty they outlawed, and they brought in decent laws, and people respected. People loved being part of the British Empire. I mean, we had India, which is one of the, now I think it's now the biggest population in the world. I think they've now overtaken China. India's a vast country. It's as big as Europe. It's got a population twice the size of Europe. We control the whole of India with a few thousand people and a few thousand troops. Hundreds of millions of people. How did we do that? Because they appreciated what we brought. They couldn't believe that the British officials were not corrupt. They didn't steal the taxes like their officials. They didn't believe that the British would take the money out of India and would use it to build a railway network around India, an educational system around India, all sorts of improvements in the Indian way of life. They thought, who are these British people? Why are they like this? Because we were Christians. We believed in doing good works. John read that passage before, you know, let your good work shine before men. We were decent people. And we won't accept this betrayal because we know our parents and our grandparents. My grandparent mother, Anne, she was from North Wales originally, one of the sweetest women you'd ever meet in your life. She went around her whole life helping people. You know, she went around her whole life blessing people. And this is what we know that British people were like in the past. We all had a childhood, you know. There's people here, I'm 60 now, so I'm getting long in the tooth, you know. 1 minute you're a young up-and-comer, the next minute you're long in the tooth, you know. So, you know, but so I've got a lot of experience to look back on. My political awakening came in April 1968 when Enoch Powell made a speech, and it was broadcast live on ITN News. And it was right in our living rooms. I was just a young boy then, 6 years old. But I can remember the impact of it. He said, it's like watching a nation building its own funeral pyre. You're destroying yourself. You know, he said 50,000 people a year coming into Britain. Of course, last year it was 1 million. He said it's going to transform the country. It's going to transform the culture. It's going to create what John talked about before, segregation in every city, community against community. I mean, so far, we've had the wealth to buy peace, but given what's happening now, with the cost of living crisis, the rampant inflation, the surging interest rates, and the economic crunch which is about to happen, the wealth mightn't be there. The wealth has brought peace in this country, but that might soon come to an end, and each community will have to start fighting for the resources, and that could get very nasty. But anyway, when Enoch Powell made that speech, I used to live in Walton, off County Road. And County Road in Walton on a Saturday was electric. It was alive, the shops, the pubs. I mean, we used to go to the Astoria Picture House, you know, before we watched Saturday morning telly, we go to the pictures on Saturday morning. And it was alive. I mean, it was really alive. There was thousands of people in County Road. But I remember going in the pub and all the fellas, you could hear them saying, Enoch Powell's right. Enoch Powell is right. And it was like a rebellion of the working class against Harold Wilson, who was in power at the time. But the Tories, because Harold Wilson had brought in all sorts of legislation, so you couldn't say this, you couldn't say that, and Labour was opening the floodgates to immigration then. And Powell had risen up. The Tories had sort of stayed mute, and Powell rose up and said that speech. And he was so respected amongst ordinary working class people. It was electric, you know, at the time. My dad loved him, and I remember him coming on the telly, Enoch Powell's on, you know. And it changed Britain, really, because I think in 1970, I mean, Harold Wilson had a huge majority. He was hot favourite to get re-elected. He got beat by Ted Heath. That was because of Powell. Because Powell told the British working class not to vote Labour in 1970. But then Heath turned out a total snake and a rat, and he sold us out to the EU. He lied to us. And so Powell had to say, look, don't vote for Heath. We need a referendum. The problem with Powell was he should have formed his own party, like a UKIP-like party, and he would have swept the board. But he never. And so we went through the 70s, and the 70s were a turbulent time, I remember that. And the National Front were there, 76. Now, we were Patriots. I had actually never met any members of the ethnic minorities. I didn't have any hatred towards anyone, but I had a great love for my country and my flag, and I had a great love for the British people. And if the British people were going to be replaced or invaded, I was going to stand up for the British people, and it was simple as that. There was no doubt about that. Now, that didn't go anywhere. In 1979, Margaret Thatcher picked up the baton, and she got elected. She changed the whole political climate in Britain at the time in 1979. And of course, in Liverpool, I was telling Ian before, in June 1979, in our first European elections to the European Parliament, Liverpool voted for Margaret Thatcher in June 1979. Not many people know that. And, but sadly, what happened was we had the Great Recession in the early 80s, and people turned against Margaret Thatcher because of unemployment. And but it was only a transitory thing. We had the Falklands War, and then we had a period of sustained economic growth in the 80s, and things, especially, I went to live in London in 1985, but I'd actually, in between that, in 1981, I was fortunate enough to get a place at Cambridge University, right? And I was a left-winger then. I'd sort of got swept up in what was happening in Liverpool. I had left-wing teachers, militant tendency. I was reading Karl Marx. I actually went into a left-wing period. And then Mrs. Thatcher turned up at Cambridge at Robinson College. And my mate was there, Mark Adden, who actually worked at number 10 Downing Street at one stage. He had eggs. He said, throw some eggs at Mrs. Thatcher. And everyone went, ooh, because the police were there. I said, I'll throw two. So I got 2 eggs. Mrs. Thatcher was over there. And threw an egg at Mrs. Thatcher. And as the egg came towards her, she just moved away, just took the wall behind her. I thought, that's a stop. But in 1983, she won a landslide, and I started to take it seriously, and I thought, I want to look at her ideas, and I actually started to agree with a lot of what she said, you know. And so much so that when she died in 2013, I went to, was it 2013 it was, yeah? I went to the funerals in St. Paul's Cathedral, you know. Went down with a few friends. And yeah, they were all there, the great and good, you know, Jeremy Clarkson, Cecil Parkinson I saw there, spoke to Norman Tebbit again, I met Norman Tebbit a few times. And yeah, we said farewell to Maggie, and then after the funeral, we had a meeting in a pub in London. Ian will love this now. We had a meeting in a pub in London, and all the Tories were there, had been to Margaret Thatcher's funeral. It was an open mic. Does anyone want to say anything? I thought, well, I'm a quiet, retiring Scouser. I'll have a go. So I told that story of when I threw the eggs at Mrs. Thatcher at Cambridge, and how I'd been turned around and actually I'd come to appreciate her. And I said, I hope when I see her in heaven that she forgives me, you know. But I said, you know, the thing about Mrs. Thatcher was she had great ideas about how to reform the economy, privatisation, cut taxes. She made Britain rich again. I said, but the thing about Mrs. Thatcher is she loved Britain. She loved the British people. She loved our history. But there was one thing there. As I said that, she had great faith in the British people. There was 3 or 4 Asian lads who were Tories who started jeering. Saying, well, they got all this British stuff. One of them was Rishi Sunak. Now, these people, obviously he's a conservative, but he's not a patriot. He doesn't love this country because he's Indian, isn't he? He hasn't got a drop of British blood in his veins. In fact, he celebrated Diwali, the Hindu festival, because he's a Hindu. That's his faith, that's his culture. But he didn't celebrate Christmas. He didn't give a Christmas message. Didn't think it was appropriate, you know, he's not a Christian. I thought, how can we have a guy like that leading our country? When he talks about stopping the boats or getting control of immigration, he's just lying to us. I mean, the thing is with politicians, they willingly lie. And he's not going to do anything about it. He's going to, the great replacement, which is destroying this nation, is speeding up. Or should I say, it's accelerating downhill, because this is a collapse into the death of Britain. And we can see now, I think we can see the end game. The demographics are changing so rapidly now that we can see that within 10 years, British people, British children may well be a minority in their own country over the next 10 years. That means the future, the youth, the energy in this nation is no longer with us, it's with other people. And it's a terrifying scenario, because we are a benevolent people, as I said earlier on, when we took the empire around the world. We are a decent people, we are moral people, we want justice. A lot of people are nothing like that at all. They want their way, and it's only their interests that matter, and you will be kicked into touch. You will be pushed to the margin, and you will be pushed overboard. And so, we've got to fight our corner. There's still enough of us, and there's still enough tradition of democracy and freedom in this country for us to rise up and fight our corner. I'm a free-born Englishman, and I hold on to that, because that gives me the right to speak my mind and to say the truth when I see it. I will not be intimidated. I've been arrested 3 times on politically trumped up charges. Each time I've turned the tables on the police and won each case. Now, when Labour was in power, Keir Starmer was the head of the Crown Prosecution Service. He prosecuted me twice. Keir Starmer is a rat. He will, if Labour get power again, it was Gordon Brown who said, don't interfere with these rape gangs. The girls are up for it. They're getting what they, deserve, basically, or what they want. Labour allowed that. I mean, when Theresa May became Home Secretary, she stood against it and stopped it. But if Labour get back in power, we're going to see an attack on the indigenous population that we've never seen before. We're going to see resources drawn from us, taken away from us, and given to the immigrants, whatever immigrant community it is. We're going to be attacked and vilified constantly in the media. Anyone who speaks in defence of the British people will be probably criminalised very quickly. The police will be used almost like the KGB in Russia. They'll be used to destroy any opposition. Anyone who stands against Labour's agenda will lose their jobs. There'll be no, I mean, it's bad enough now, and in the public sector it'll be even worse. It's not a pretty picture to paint, Doesn't have to be that way, but we can only stop it if people have the boldness to stand up and speak the truth. And as Pat said, he spoke the truth. He stood for elections. We still live in a democracy. We still have the freedom to speak our mind on these issues, to get organised. And I'm sad to see for Britain go away, but the National Housing Party, the UK, we're a Christian party. This is really important. We stand on Christian values. We believe the Renaissance, the rebirth, the Reformation of this country begins with turning back to God, focusing on God again. We were a Christian nation, really, from the 6th century until very, very recently, 1500 years. It's who we are as a people. I mean, some people say, oh, we're a pagan nation. We're not pagan at all. I mean, there's been no continuity in that at all, It was Christianity that made this nation, that gave us our culture and our identity and our values. And we are a Christian party. And there is a force now in America called Christian nationalism. I've always believed in Christian nationalism. And we stand up for our nation. As the Bible said, God made the nations and he made the borders between the nations to create order and create peace. You take away those borders, chaos reigns. But if God is for the nation, we need our Christian values. We need our morality. We need the family back. We need a Christian identity again. We need, as I say, to respect marriage between a man and a woman. We need to welcome children into the world, our children, our future. See children as a blessing from God and not a curse. I believe it is fundamentally evil to kill an unborn child. And I know a lot of women in this country have had abortions. There is forgiveness in God for that. But we don't want any more women to have abortions because it's not healthy. Most abortions are healthy mothers killing healthy children, and it's not right. This is what I feel as a Christian. The Lord speaks to me over these issues, and there's a power of suggestion as well. We see this whole transgender agenda at the moment, and young kids are being asked in school, are they in the right body? Do they feel comfortable in their own body? And that's a power of suggestion there. You're opening their mind up, you're playing with their imagination. Who am I? What is my identity? What body do I really belong in? This is warping children. This is an abuse of children. It's child abuse. It's despicable in my eyes. There's no justification for it at all. All this has got to stop. I mean, thankfully in America, the forces of good and the forces of evil are equally divided. It's 50-50 Republican Democrats. There's a real battle going on over these issues. And in the near future, the Republicans may well triumph. And that will give us a great spare, because hopefully that will spill over into this country. But we have to take a stand. And it's great that whatever networks we can form, at the moment we've got to form networks. We've got to stay in touch, we've got to encourage each other, we've got to bring more people on board, we've got an educational role, we've got an organisational role, and we've got a leadership role. Because we can't rely on the established parties that are wasting space. We've got to rise up as a people. And you know, the British people have done this in the past. In the past, you know, we've had the Chartists, when they refused to give working class people the vote. You know, we had the English Civil War, when the king thought he could rule as a tyrant and he was overthrown. You know, we've had the Peasants' Rebellion, we've had the Magna Carta. The British are a peace-loving people, but they demand justice. If there's no justice, the British get upset. When the government starts stealing our resources and giving it to other people, financing foreign wars, pouring money into other countries, like they pour money into India and China, who are actually getting richer than us now, far richer, but we give them aid. You know, all these people, every bogus asylum seekers, because they're just international criminals. This asylum thing is absolutely nonsense. Coming from war-torn France. I mean, you know, France, you know, why do you have to escape from France? It's absurd. How can you claim asylum from France? It's absolute madness. But each one of these people that come over on the boats, brought over by Serco, put into hotels by Serco, given social housing, each single asylum seeker costs £65,000 per annum. So over 10 years, because they stay on the benefits, over 10 years probably cost £1 million each asylum seeker. And these are not just the ones coming over on the boats, these are the ones also who are here. It's got, the whole immigration racket is costing this country tens of billions of pounds. And we can't afford it now. The country's bankrupt. We've got over £1 trillion worth of debt. And do you know what £1 trillion is? It's 1,000 billion pounds. 1,000 million pounds. That's just the national debt of this country. Now, you can't even get your head around that figure, can you? We're paying interest on that now, and the interest rates are shooting up, so it's going to get more and more expensive. I tell you what, the government's got no money. And they're not going to be able to like print money like they did with the credit crunch to get out of the problem, because inflation will stop them doing that. They're going to have to start making tough decisions of cutting spending, increasing taxes, and we're all facing this cost of living crisis. We're seeing the price of basic foodstuffs like cheese and butter and milk and whatever. It's going through the roof. You pick up a little lump of cheese, it's £3. You pick up a tub of butter, it's £7. I mean, people are going to face real poverty again in this country. We thought it was a thing of the past, real poverty, but it's about to hit us. And all these lavish benefits that they've been given to immigrants since the Second World War will no longer be able to finance them. And what are the immigrant communities going to do? We had a little taste of that with BLM in London. And the truth is, and I heard a prison guard say yesterday, we don't control the prisons anymore. The ethnic gangs control the prisons now. We don't control our cities anymore. We saw that in BLM. When the BLM mob ran at the police left it. Did anyone remember that? The police left it. We'd never seen the police behave like that in Britain. They turned around and they legged it as fast as they could. I.e., they're running the show, not us. And it's going to be happening in our cities. It's going to become lawless, you know. This is like a dystopia which is unfolding. But it's like it says in the Bible, you reap what you sow. You sow to the wind, you reap the whirlwind. And we're going to reap a whirlwind. So we're going to have to come together in groups to defend ourselves. I believe that. Because the state's not going to defend us anymore. The police are a waste of time. The army's been cut to a minimum. Never forget my fight in Russia or China. We've hardly got any soldiers out there anymore. You know, the army aren't going to come on the streets and protect us. We're going to have to protect ourselves. You know, it's a scary scenario because we're used to social peace in Britain. We're used to having a state that functions. If it starts to unravel, it could unravel very fast. It could become quite desperate in this country. I really believe that. And we're going to see this across Western Europe. because you can't be so reckless with your nation and with your way of life and think there's not going to be any consequences. There's going to be serious consequences. But never give in, because it's we, the people, who ultimately make the choice. If we, the people, get mobilised, stick together, come together, we're still an unstoppable force. We have to educate people. People have been brainwashed for a long time and indoctrinated, but all that's going to fall by the wayside very quickly, because people have still got common sense. They still can be very realistic. When, as we saw over COVID, initially they were just sheep, lambs to the slaughter, but the dissent began to grow and grow. The government would never try another lockdown because we wouldn't tolerate it anymore. And I think people now know that it is fake news, it is manipulation, it is mind warping, it is a cycle. That's all these people do. They play games with us. It's not in our interest. They don't care about us. Would they allow this to happen to our country if they cared about us? No. They care about themselves and their own futures and their own careers. I mean, Rishi Sunak said, I want to go and live in California when I've made me millions. This is just a stepping stone. No, we want people that run in our country who care about the British people. I think we deserve that. And it's time for rebellion, really, guys. But that rebellion can only happen when we come together as a people again. And how do we do that? We've got Twitter. On Twitter now we can speak the truth. You can say this. I mean, if you started an NHPUK account on Twitter, I thought, you know, you might get a couple of thousand followers, 20,000 followers. People are desperate to hear the truth. They want to hear bold voices who are telling them what is actually going on and what we need to do to resolve it. And so it's going to be an adventurous time over the next 2 or 3 years. Things are going to get pretty choppy, you know. The sea's going to get choppy. And we're going to be there in the midst of it all. It's the Patriots that are still the hope of this country. We've got a new vehicle now, the National Housing Party, the National Housing Party of the UK. Bring us all together and let's fight back and let's defend what we have. Thank you.